Welcome to the award-winning Superhuman Academy podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to give you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Superhuman Academy podcast, which is lovingly crafted thanks to this awesome review from Light for Life, who says, "Thank you, Jonathan, 5 stars. Jonathan Levy's Superhuman podcast, his book, and his courses present innumerable precious gifts for the well-being of humanity and for each of us. Thank you, Jonathan, for your dedication to advanced higher learning and focused awareness in the human family." Well, thank you so much, Light for Life. That review totally lit up my week. And if you haven't left a do, because it makes us so happy. On to this week's episode. Today, I was joined by Maggie Berghoff. She is a functional medicine nurse practitioner and health consultant who works with celebrities, entertainers, athletes, and CEOs and executives to up-level their physical and mental health. She's been featured in Entrepreneur, Well Plus Good, Under Armour, CBS, Glamour, iHeartRadio, and many, many, many more. I also found out that she is a partner with Richard Branson's Virgin group, and they have all kinds of cool masterminds that they lead together. So really, really cool. And Maggie and I have a lot of friends in common, from Dave Asprey to JJ Virgin and Diana House. So it was really cool to finally connect. Now, in this episode, we talked about all things high performance. I got a better understanding of what it actually looks like to be at the most elite levels of performance, and some insights into about comprehensive testing. We talked. Maggie and I share a mutual friend in Dave Asprey, so we're really passionate about all kinds of cool biohacks, and I definitely learned some things that I didn't know. I have some homework for this episode, for things I want to research and things I want to buy based on this conversation. So I think you're all really going to enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Maggie Berghoff. Berghoff, she is a functional medicine nurse practitioner and health consultant who works with celebrities, entertainers, athletes, and CEOs and executives to up-level their physical and mental health. She's been featured in Entrepreneur, Well Plus Good, Under Armour, CBS, Glamour, iHeartRadio, and many, many, many more. I also found out that she is a partner with Richard Branson's Virgin group, and they have all kinds of cool masterminds that they lead together. So really, really cool. And Maggie and I have a lot of friends in common, from Dave Asprey to JJ Virgin and Diana House. So it was really cool to finally connect. Now, in this episode, we talked about all things high performance. I got a better understanding of what it actually looks like to be at the most elite levels of performance, and some insights into what it about comprehensive testing. We talked about Asprey, so we're really passionate about all kinds of cool biohacks, and I definitely learned some for things I want to research and things I want to buy based on this conversation. So I think you're all really going to enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Maggie Berghoff. Berghoff, she's a medicine nurse practitioner who works with Mr. Jeff Madoff, how are you, my friend? Pleasure to finally connect.
It is very nice to meet you. This like cross the globe kind of Zoom conference is kind of cool, from New York to Israel.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I asked our mutual friend, I don't know if you know how we got connected exactly, but I asked our mutual friend, I said, Joe, I have my last 15 podcast episodes of a 300 episode run. I'm winding down the podcast, and I want them to be the best 15 episodes. I want to end this thing on a bang. Who do I need to talk to who's willing to do an interview this week or next week or the coming week? And he goes, oh my goodness, you have to talk to Jeff Madoff. You were the first person who came up. So a big shout out to our mutual friend, Joe Polish from Genius Network. And I'm really excited because Joe knows literally everybody. And if you're the first person who came to mind, I think we're in for a hell of an interview today.
Well, I don't want to disappoint you, so we should wrap it up after that nice intro. So thank you very much, Jonathan. It was great meeting you.
It's been a pleasure. It'd be funny if the editor cut in the music right now. It's just like, dun, 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 dun. Anyway, I actually saw a show where they recently talk about creativity. They opened the second season and they said, so where did we leave off? So that happened. And then we just stopped and the story ended, and then they roll credits, and then the show continues into a second season. I thought it was so clever. I have a question for you, Jeff. I have a lot of questions for you. Whenever I see someone with a bio like yours, a career like yours, who's been so multidisciplinary, who's been all over, who's done this, that, and then a little bit of this, and then transitioned into that, I always ask, how do you describe what you do? When someone asks at a cocktail party, what do you do?
I guess part of it depends on the mood that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And the nature of the party. But, I mentioned that I'm involved in a few things, that I have a production company. I'm a director, and we produce commercials and music videos and branded content. And I also teach a course at Parsons School for Design called Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas, which my book is named after. It's based on my class. And I'm a playwright and producer. I have a play that's opening next May. Let us hope that the world is in a healthier place.
Right.
And so I sort of give it quickly like that, a quick summation of some of the stuff I'm involved with.
Incredible. And you actually started your career as a fashion designer and were one of the top 10 fashion designers and decided to put that on hold. Now, a couple times in my life, have been doing something, doing okay at it, and then decided, wait a minute, this isn't what I want to be doing, and transitioning. And I call that creating a meaningful life. And I want to ask about that transition point before we get into what you're doing today. What makes someone in the top 10 in their field go, hold on, this isn't what I want to be doing?
Well, first of all, to be clear, I was chosen one of the top 10 young designers in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were only 8 of us at the time, so it wasn't hard to be in the top 10.
Right.
So I don't want to inflate this. Oh my God, how did he walk away from billions of dollars? I had a small company. We were doing okay. We were growing very quickly. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was ignorant, but fortunately not stupid, so I could learn, and I did learn. And I had started the company right out of college, and that I went to school at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, which was a fabulous place. But a couple, 3 years out and many trips to New York later, I wanted to move to New York. So the city at first was kind of intimidating because I hadn't been in a city like that before. I grew up in Akron, Ohio.
Okay.
And so when I told my financial backer, because my business grew so quickly, I had to get financial backing. And he was a very good man, but the reason he backed me is he owned banks in Wisconsin, and I employed about 120 people there. And he liked my business because I employed a lot of people. And so he was always clear that that's one of the reasons that he invested. And he told me if I moved to New York, then he wouldn't continue to invest in my company. And there was nothing mean about that. He had made that clear when we first got involved with each other. And when we first got involved, I never thought I'd be moving to New York.
Right.
So then I had to face a big decision.
Right. Tell me about the piece where this was kind of your first business you ever started, it sounds like, after school, and you grew it to 120 employees. I feel like we got to touch on that a little bit.
So what happened was I was working in a small clothing boutique, and I was the buyer. And again, that sounds more inflated than it actually was. We were a little store owned by a guy just a few years older than I. And but it was a very cool, unique shop. A friend of mine called me, somebody I grew up with. He had graduated from college a year earlier, and he said, "Can you think of a gig that would earn more than bank interest?" I said, "Well, I work in this store. I see what we sell. I could always draw. I'll design clothes." And he said, "Okay."
Wow.
And he sent me more money than I had ever had at one time. So hold on to your seat, Jonathan. Within a week, I had $1,500 in my account. Staggering. I know it's staggering. But again, I didn't know anything. So I was very naive. But there's no way to learn better than when learning is contingent on your survival, and not learning puts you under. So I had to learn, and I learned very, very quickly, and learned a tremendous amount. And I thought it made sense without going through the whole thing of eventually opening up my own factory. So I employed in Wisconsin 120 people, but I also had an office in New York, an office in Los Angeles, and a national sales force working for me. And so I had started the company when I was 21. And back then, startups weren't the thing that young people do.
Right.
And, and there was nothing that prepared me for, on one hand, being creative, designing a line of clothing every season, and running a business and managing so many people. So there was an awful lot going on, but I didn't know any different, so I dealt with it. So that's how I had so many employees, because the business was doubling every 3 or 4 months. So it was growing so quickly, and I had to hire people in the sales positions, in sewing positions, in management positions, all of that kind of thing.
It's incredible to me because I didn't catch, maybe I missed it, but I didn't catch along the way where you did the MBA, or the intensive course of
Yes.
training. It sounds like you figured it out as you went along, which is incredible.
Well,
I've built businesses, I've grown businesses, and I can tell you, you make it sound so easy. Like, oh, well, I just, I hired a bunch of people for sales. It's not easy.
no,
That's
it's
incredible.
not. It is not easy at all. And I think that's one of the big about being an entrepreneur is people paint this picture of somehow, they just got on this rocket ship to fame and riches. And
Right.
I did neither. It's really hard and it's a lot of work. And I think the main quality that I have that has sustained me through the businesses that I've been in and the things that I'm doing is perseverance.
Yeah.
Putting up with the difficult stuff, figuring out some way over, under, or around or through the obstacles. But it is really hard. And anybody who tells you that it isn't is not being honest, because it's tough.
And I think this is an interesting kind of tangent to go into, which is I think there's an element when it comes to perceived difficulty, there is an element of a bell curve, because when you're young, as you said, you're naive and you're like, oh, I'll just put an ad in the paper and I'll just hire 20 people and it'll be okay. And everything seems so easy. And then, along about in your late 20s, early 30s, you now know how hard it is. And it becomes hard, it's hard. It's like when I grew this business, it was hard. And it's like everything is challenging and there's so much to do. And you realize what a struggle is going to be. And then you get to the second half of the bell curve, or I should say the final third, where mastery starts to kick in. And now when you start a business or you write a book, you know enough about the world and you've done it enough times and you've gone through that hump where now it's like, okay, I know what I need to do. I know how I like to hire people. I know how I like to manage. And so, but you have to get over that bump. And a lot of people, I think, get stuck at that first piece of the bell curve where it's like, it used to be so easy and now it's really hard. What happened?
Well, there's the old saying that youth is wasted on the young.
Yes.
And,
yes.
When I started my business, because of the naivete and because of my complete oblivion to what the risk was and what was at stake and all of those things, you undertake things that maybe if you knew more, you wouldn't do.
Yeah.
But I have to say that I have often challenged younger self when I'm meeting certain challenges because my younger self would push through those things because, again, it was that naivete that helped me. Now, when you're a kid and you're naive, but you're basically a good and nice person, people will help you.
Yep.
When you get to a certain point, if you haven't learned anything, you just seem like an idiot. So hopefully we learn in that curve that you're talking about as part of that roller coaster ride that, never really ends. You can have all the mastery in the world and then maybe your businesses, you could be a very successful retailer and a restaurateur, a touring musician, and then COVID hits. Right. And all the mastery you had has got nothing to do with this challenge because it's totally new. So how do you adapt and reinvent yourself? It's always a challenge when you're an entrepreneur.
I love that idea that it's a roller coaster and it is going up because you're facing bigger and bigger challenges. I recently was speaking to a mentor of mine And I'd made this kind of the same mistake that I made 10 years ago, where I built a business around what I thought I should be doing, and it was not making me happy and it was not fulfilling me creatively. And I said to her, I said, Linda, how am I reliving this lesson? And she said, life, and I think this is such an interesting thing to share with our audience. Life is like a spiral staircase. From one angle, if you look at it, you're learning the same lesson. You're on, 90 degrees at the same place where you were, but you're learning it in 3 dimensions. You're learning it at a higher level. Now you're learning it with a bigger business or a higher level of personal fulfillment, or you're learning it while you're trying to juggle a family, and relearning the lesson for lack of a better word, at a higher level. I think that's so true also of the roller coaster. It's like you're going through the same level of difficulty, but you're playing a much bigger, higher stakes game that's more fulfilling, more satisfying, more impactful, whatever it might be.
Hopefully you're
Yeah,
correct
hopefully.
about that. It's more fulfilling and so on, because I think that the really difficult things I went through when I was younger with that business, because I had to then lay off people.
Right.
Now, the people that I was laying off who worked for me in the factory, for instance, had 2 factories. I was 15 to 30 years younger than they were.
Mm-hmm.
They all had families. I didn't. But I was acutely aware that their life was going to be greatly impacted by not having that job anymore.
Right.
And, and so I felt that, empathy for my employees. But at a certain point, I didn't have any choice.
Right. You couldn't sell the business?
No, because I was the business.
Yeah.
I hadn't gotten so big that it could just glide on with somebody else. So I kind of was the business. And frankly, I didn't even think about selling the business because I don't think it was saleable from that standpoint when you've got a one designer business, even though we were doing quite well and all that. Because if I left, if I would have sold it, they would have wanted me to stay for at least another 3 years.
Right.
I just wanted to do something else at that point. Once I moved to New York.
I admire the hell out of you for putting your needs first, because I always talk about, I think too many entrepreneurs understand that they're creating a business to serve the needs of people, whether it's solving a problem or usually it's solving a problem, meeting a need, but they forget one little thing, that they're people too, and that they need to serve their needs as well. And so like, I cringe when I see entrepreneurs who build a business that serves everyone's needs but their own.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that most entrepreneurs are that altruistic. They
Right.
get into business because they want to start a business. They want to make money.
Right.
And that they want to, I am an entrepreneur because I'm unemployable.
Same.
So, that's why I'm an entrepreneur. But I think that the fundamental question that people neglect to ask themselves, and I was fortunate enough because of circumstance that I had to face this kind of harsh reality at a very young age, which is, what's success to me?
Yes, exactly.
And when you don't think about that, sometimes people don't think about it at all. And they may do quite well in their jobs, but they aren't fulfilled. They don't feel successful because they aren't loving what they're doing. They aren't enjoying it, but it becomes that kind of golden handcuffs where you're making money, you keep doing it, but somehow it's the old, is that all there is? Because it doesn't feel good anymore. The business is going, you're doing fine financially, but inside it's just not happening for you. And I
completely concur.
I mean, so I think it's a really important question to ask yourself when you're starting out on anything is, what does success look like to me? And why am I doing this? What's going to keep me motivated when things get tough?
I keep a list of secrets of adulthood, the kind of big life lessons. Is an idea I got from Gretchen Rubin, former guest on the show. And recently I wrote to myself when I had this epiphany, a reminder, there's no happiness in living other people's dreams. It's true. You could be living the dream, right? People love to say, I'm living the dream. It's like, but is it your dream? And sometimes you find that it's not. So now I have a question for you. You mentioned that your tenacity and I forget the exact word that you gave.
Perseverance.
Perseverance, thank you, was a big secret to your success. From where I'm sitting, it also sounds that another big part of your success and creativity throughout your journey can really be credited to the humility of beginner's mind. You've multiple times throughout the interview said, I didn't know anything, I was naive. Walk me through that. Have you always had this kind of like, I don't know what I don't know, and I'm open to not knowing and learning approach?
Uh, Being a lifelong learner, having unbounded curiosity, I think is, first of all, essential to being creative.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm on that fence of, I know what I don't know
Mm-hmm.
because I know that I don't know a lot of things. Okay. Uh, and it's not humility to me, it's reality. That's who I am. I know some things I'm really good at. I know other things that I'm not. I know other talents, and I need to complement my talents so that things can be brought to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that to me is also one of the pleasures of doing business, whether the play that I'm doing, which I'm really excited about, or when I'm working with a great crew and shooting a commercial or some kind of thing through my production company, the collaboration with talented people. And I think that if you're open to learning all the time, which I'm hungry for, I love that. And if you're curious, that keeps you going. And maybe, to use a term, it keeps you humble, or maybe it sounds humble, but I look at it more as just, that's a necessary component in wanting to learn and being curious. Because if you think you know everything, then what's left to learn?
So on that topic, I want to ask, creativity and learning are very much connected. And this is why I have the opportunity to talk a lot about learning, because I teach creativity, because I teach accelerated learning. I honestly think that creativity is one of the most misunderstood personal virtues. If I tell you kindness, everyone understands kindness. If I tell you intelligence, we may have different definitions of intelligence, but everyone kind of understands intelligence. People do not understand what creativity is, and they go, oh, I've never been a good artist. Like, that is not creativity. So I want to ask you, because you literally teach courses on creativity, what does creativity mean to you?
To me, creativity means having a compelling reason to affect change.
Okay.
So that compelling need to affect change is what creativity is. So that could be a blank canvas that you want to change into a painting. That could be a blank page that you want to change into a novel. But that could also be an opportunity that you want to build a business out of. So I think that creativity needs to embrace a lot more than what most people think of as a traditional definition, which is somehow having to do with the arts. I am involved with the arts in terms of the things that I do, but I also am an entrepreneur. I started a business. Entrepreneurs start something from nothing. That's where all
Right.
art starts. And I'm not suggesting that every business is an art, but the act of entrepreneurship is the act of creating something, creating a business that didn't exist before. So to me, that's a creative act.
I completely agree with you. And, I think where a lot of people get hung up is they get into the particulars of that, creation, and don't realize that there are people who are creative conversationalists, right? And can have just such a creative conversation and go out into the weeds and take people out of their comfort zone in a way that they enjoy. My wife is very creative socially because she can just influence situations, but I don't think she attributes that as creativity. And I always tell her, you're so creative, and you solve social problems in such a creative way. This person has this issue and you're able to find a way to solve things. And so I also think there's a lot of limiting beliefs there, right? People have a very fixed mindset around creativity because we think it's an inherent trait. And what's crazy is there has been research that actually creativity, I may be taking the words out of your mouth, but creativity is actually one of the easiest things to train. It's literally a mindset shift that once you break this pattern of thinking for people, all of a sudden they go back to childhood and children are so incredibly creative. Tell me a bit about that. And I imagine you've done the research much more than I have.
Well, I think the main thing that happens when you're younger, and this can happen in the home, it can also happen in school, where people value control more than they value creativity, because creativity, there's risk involved and there's a certain lack of control. You don't quite know what's going to happen. And so, school tends to be kind of regimented. So creativity isn't really fostered. Doing work targeted towards getting the grades is what's fostered.
Right.
At home, if you're doing certain things, it can seem like, if you're reading, and it's not your school assignment, or if you're drawing or something, that can seem like something to do once you finished the homework that you've got. I was really fortunate because my parents, when they saw that I liked to draw, they'd bring me home pieces of craft paper from their store, and I could draw and do stuff. And they never, ever inhibited my creative output or what I did. That did cause problems at school because I had teachers that liked me a lot or really didn't like me. And the ones that really didn't like me were the ones that were incredibly rigid in how they looked at assignments and what they did. So I have the rare distinction of being blackballed from the National Honor Society because
Really?
I had the grades, but my behavior was in the mind of the representative from our school, the teacher who represented the Honor Society. My behavior was not in line with the National Honor student, even though I had the grades.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Now, how much of your work touches on how people can foster and promote creativity in themselves and others? I don't know if this is completely out of left field. I never read a guest's book before I have them on the show because otherwise I don't ask the beginner's questions.
So first of all, I teach. And, I teach because it's a great way to learn. I have a lot of fun doing it. It gives me a platform to bring in an amazing array of people, from Pulitzer Prize winning journalists, the designer for the 9/11 Memorial, Michael Arad, to comedians like Roy Wood Jr. from The Daily Show and Eliza Schlesinger. So I have a huge range of people that I bring in. So I learn from them as they share what they know with the students, and we engage in the kind of dialogue you and I are engaging in. So to me, fostering creativity is, first of all, giving permission to question. And that's often not encouraged. But I love that in class. And I tell my students, I'm going to say a lot of things up here. Challenge me on whatever you want. And it was interesting, a couple of years ago, there was a student, the first day of class, and I said that, and the student stood up and said, this class is bullshit. Everything that happens in school is bullshit. And when it's bullshit, I don't need to listen to it.
Wow.
And I said, it's an interesting point you make, because you just made that point while you're here in school, which means you are bullshit, and I don't have to really pay attention to you then. And students laughed, and he went like that. And he ended up being one of the best students in the class. He was great. But he issued that challenge at the beginning. And I just found it kind of humorous that he's telling me in the place that he calls bullshit that you don't need to pay attention to anybody who speaks in this place, which then included him, But so I think that, giving that permission to question is really important part of creativity. And by the way, people also take permission. And they take that permission, and sometimes, as the saying goes, I'd rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. And I agree with that in a lot of applications. So I think that, fostering that creativity is allowing people to have their voice. You don't have to agree with it, but I do think you have to hear it. And I do think that you have to respond and respect that, even if you don't agree with it.
Yeah, it's like they always say, the fastest way to kill a productive and creative brainstorming session is to say that's a bad idea. Same goes,
Right.
by the way, with improv. The only word you can't say is no.
Right.
And literally the only word you can't say is no. And it's literally because of that. It's because the moment you do that, you immediately change the dynamic and people start becoming defensive of their ideas, or defensive of their ideas, or protective of themselves and not willing to share those ideas.
Right. Right.
And just think how many institutions, whether it be companies, I know many companies who behave this way. It's like, that's a stupid idea. Why would you share it? Instantly have now killed the creativity of at least that team member, if not everyone else who heard that comment. Schools, where if you don't encourage creativity and I hate to use the term out of the box thinking, but really wacky thinking, let's go for a better term, and you don't encourage it in the way that you did, by the way, in that class. It's like what you literally did was recognize that person's idea in a very creative way. You demonstrated openness to creative thinking by using creative thinking to acknowledge that creative thinking, right? And if you don't do that and literally grab it and amplify it, you create an environment, where it's just not welcome. Think about how much creativity is lost because of that.
Well, it's squelched. And, I have been in so many meetings because I deal with a lot of global brands. And I've been in these meetings where the person running the meeting mistakes silence for agreement. And the reason that there's silence is because people don't want to be called out, embarrassed, or humiliated in front of the other people that they work with.
Right.
So it becomes easier, and this happens all the time, it just becomes easier to keep your mouth shut. Mm-hmm. And then creativity is stifled. Or in school, the student who is told by the teacher in elementary school, that's a dumb question, kills the spirit of that kid. And, and in college, a lot of the damage has been done already. And so I do what I can to make it okay. And one of the things that I tell the students is the only dumb question is the one that you don't ask that screws you up later because you didn't.
Yes. I have a policy of replying. I work with a lot of folks in the Philippines where there's a very kind of polite culture, and I get a lot of sorry for the dumb question and my immediate response. And also I work with a lot of women who society pushes down in a way and don't make too much noise. And I also have a degree in sociology, so I'm very aware of the baggage that all the different people I work with carry. And of course, these are stereotypes and not everyone is this way. But I have a lot of wonderful women on my team who are subject to social pressures that I, as a man, am not subject to. So I've made a habit of immediately going, don't apologize, number one. And there are no stupid questions, only people too stupid to ask them. It's when I say too stupid to ask them, it's the getting in the head about I'm going to look dumb. And that's just a silly, dumb thing to feel, but it's a valid
it comes,
thing.
and the roots of that though are real. Imagine that you're in third grade and you ask a question, the teacher says something, other kids laugh, and you're never going to do that again. You're going to keep quiet. Or you'll get rebellious and act out on other fronts. Yeah. But, and that's the problem. And I think a lot of times people don't realize the damage they're doing to other people and how that fuels and becomes the antecedent to certain behaviors. And this is, by the way, goes through not only our culture, but others as well.
Yes. And I want to touch also on what you said about a lot of people will sit in a room and not share their ideas. And one of the things that I had my mind kind of blown when I did finally get to go through the management training, and I did a wonderful management training with Annie Hyman Pratt, who was the CEO who grew Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, and is really a phenomenal leadership coach and one of the few women I personally know who are coaching entrepreneurs in management. So she has a very her whole team is female, and she has a very different approach to management, which I think is very new and refreshing. And one of the things she talks about is this idea that silence is not acceptance. And also you are battling against so many decades, if not centuries of programming. So you need to go around the room and ask everyone, basically call them out. You would think it'd be the opposite, that I'm putting people, especially the women on the team, on the spot by saying, hey, what do you think? But she says, until you've asked everyone and actually given them that permission to speak. And if they don't have anything, they can very comfortably say, I don't know, I liked what I heard. But if they have something on the tip of their tongue and they're beating themselves up about it, you just saved their bacon by going, we haven't heard from Mina in a long time. Let's hear what she has to say. And it's been a game changer in my team, especially when you ask someone who might think that you think that they're not qualified to respond. So when you ask the executive administrator, or, I ask my EA who sits in on a meeting about marketing, right? And she always has an idea because she has a different perspective. That's creativity, right? And I go, we're talking about marketing and funnels and sales. And I go, well, Leslie, what do you think? And then she, with her 5 years of customer service experience running my customer service team before that, has something to share that none of us thought of. So it's such a valuable thing, and talk about how to, as you said, foster creativity.
Yeah, I do the same thing in class, and I do the same thing when we have brainstorming meetings.
Mm-hmm.
But in class, I will tell the students, I'm not one of those teachers that waits for you to raise your hand, because I want to hear from everybody in here. So I want to know what you think, and I want to hear the voices that I don't normally hear. And, I asked the first day of school, how many of you have a problem with speaking in front of others? More than half of the hands go up.
Yeah.
And I'll suss somebody out and say, so tell me why do you have that concern? Mm-hmm. And they think that, it's just, it makes them really nervous. They don't know if they're going to sound intelligent when they say something. So then we go into it a little bit further. And each time I say, how many of you others can relate to that? And a bunch of people raise their hand. So after we do about, maybe it's 3 minutes of back and forth and me polling the rest of the students, said, now, what did we just do? To the student that I centered. And we talked. And I said, and you talked in front of the class and voiced your opinion. You saw other people that shared your opinion. How do you feel now? What do you mean? I mean, is your heart racing? Are you about to drop over? Or, what? I'm okay. Great. So you just found out that you won't die. You won't have a heart attack. You're not going to have seizures, that you could talk in front of everybody else, even solicit other opinions, and you survive to talk about it. Remember this. So the next time you do it, it won't be quite as fearful. And the time after that, it won't be quite as fearful. And you can overcome that kind of reluctance to use your voice.
Yes. Now, we still have to cover your book, which I want to have time for, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask a little bit, because I've been a student of marketing since I was a very young child. I used to shout at my dad when he would mute the commercials, because I'd be like, I want to know what they're doing. I want to know how they're getting people to buy an $80,000 car, So I'm fascinated by marketing. I'm fascinated by the history and the tradition. And you've worked with some of the biggest brands in the world. What is that like from a creativity perspective? What are you seeing in the marketplace? I mean, just tell me, what would I see if I were a fly on the wall between a meeting with you and some of your incredible list of clients? I mean, Ralph Lauren, and let's see, I have a whole list of them here. Victoria's Secret, Radio City Music Hall, Harvard School of Public Health. What's it like to work with these huge organizations?
Well, if you were a fly on the wall, you wouldn't have the mental capacity to process any of it. So,
that's a very creative answer.
And then, bam, you're smashed against the wall because somebody saw that fly sitting there.
Right.
Well, first of all, the foundation of meeting with any of these people and working with them is understanding the context of the meeting. Mm-hmm. So if I'm, I did Ralph Lauren's 50th anniversary show. It was a huge event in Central Park in New York. And because I had worked with Ralph for over 35 years, I know his brand. I know the context, meaning the world that he lives in, that his products live in. In other words, what his brand stands for. So there's a fundamental knowledge that informs discussion and decisions about what you'll do. So, it's not going to be models that'll have safety pins going through their ears and wearing torn leather. That's not Ralph Lauren, but that may be some other designer. So first of all, it's understanding the context and then speaking from a knowledge base that allows them to know that you know what you're talking about, because it's like, well, you don't even know who we are, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important. Same thing with Victoria's Secret. There's a brand, there's a history, there are things to do, but I did things with Victoria's Secret that broke their mold, that the person I worked directly with fully supported, others in the company didn't until they saw it was successful. And I'll give you a quick example. A few years ago, we did this thing with the Angels playing football, and it was a huge success. But when I pitched the idea, initially there was a lot of resistance and pushback. Nobody wants to see the girls in football. You can't even tell who it is. What are you going to have the girls in football uniforms for? They can't even play football. This is stupid and all that. But the person that I worked directly with loved the idea and had the confidence, because I've been working with them for years, that I could execute on this idea.
Mm-hmm.
So we did this, and what I did is I had stunt doubles, which were actual female professional football players. There's a team in New Jersey, and we got people from that. And I also auditioned women's volleyball players because they were tall and had more model-like bodies than football players. But, you know, and I know how to direct and edit action sequences. So you couldn't tell it wasn't the models doing it. And at first you couldn't really tell that it was the models. And then there's the big reveal at the end when they take off their football helmets and shake off their hair, and it's, you know, kind of fun looking. Well, that piece was so well received. It ran on all of the major networks in its entirety, on the Today Show, on Good Morning America, on all of these programs, because it was such a novel idea seeing the models like that when you had never seen them like that before. That Super Bowl weekend, they had all the giant screens, the Jumbotrons at Times Square. They leased, I think, 6 of them that were playing this spot on regular intervals on Super Bowl Sunday. And then the final payoff is, I can't remember if it was Advertising Age or one of them that does, somebody who lists the top 10 commercials for the Super Bowl listed that as like the number 3 commercial. It never ran on television. It wasn't a commercial, but it had so permeated the consciousness that people thought it was. So that was an example of bringing a creative idea that evolved the brand in a bit in that way, and brought something very new to the mix. Because I never assume, no matter how long I've worked with a client, that they're going to hire me again. I think that you always have to have a reason to bring people back. And that reason is you deliver on the promise, you always contribute new ideas, and you make them think. And even if the ideas aren't adopted, they know that you're thinking on their behalf. And I think that if you're looking out for your client's best interests, by proxy, you're looking out for your own, because that means they'll hire you again if you're successful.
It's very interesting. And this shows the level of mastery you have within creativity, because early on we talked about, it reminds me of the saying, you know, you have to know the rules really, really well to break them. For example, if you want to write beautifully in the English language and you want to start sentences with and but, which is technically wrong, you need to have a mastery of the English language. You clearly have a mastery of creativity, because earlier on in the beginning of the interview, we talked about how creativity means never setting boundaries. The first thing I asked you is, you go, well, you need to understand the brand and the boundaries that are set for you and operate within those. And that, I think, is the difference between starting out in this field of being a creative person versus the level of mastery where you can see the restrictions and not be restricted by them.
No, you're right. And I think that one of the things that happens is some people see getting a gig like that is a tremendous opportunity for them to make their imprint creatively, as opposed to realizing they are being hired by a client.
Right.
So they are responsible for that client. So within that playground, or within, to use Stanislavski's acting term, the given circumstances, within those given circumstances, you can be creative. But if you think that you can obliterate, like the example I gave with Ralph Lauren, you know, safety pins and torn leather, that ain't going to happen.
Sure.
So you can think they're really creative, they're so closed-minded. No, they've got billions of dollars invested in creating that brand, and they aren't going to let somebody destroy it because they think they have a cool idea. So you have to
100%.
understand those given circumstances and realize who you're talking to and what you're doing. And it's an opportunity for sure to show your work and to build a good client. But if you think that it's an opportunity to obliterate something so that you can shine and the brand is not even recognizable, that's not going to happen.
Fascinating. Fascinating. I feel like we could talk for many, many, many hours, and I hope we do get the opportunity to. But I want to hear about the book. Tell me why write the book, which I guess is the same question of why teach the course. What is the mission behind this book, and what are people going to discover when they read it?
Well, the book is called Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas. This is my shameless book plug, holding it
Do
up.
it.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go. And there's my name there. And my daughter designed the cover.
That is awesome.
Which
How
at
creative.
first it frightened the hell out of the publisher because they didn't know that actually my daughter's a very, very talented graphic artist. So I said, well, look at her website. And, I know your neck hairs are standing up when I say, oh, I want my daughter to do it, but look at her website and see whether you think she has the talent. So I'm proud that my daughter did
It's
that.
beautiful.
Thank you. But I was told, I've been teaching this class for 14 years. Two things happen all the time. When people say, what's the name of the course you teach? And I say, Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas. I wish I had had a class like that when I was in college. I haven't even explained what the class is.
Right.
I just said the name. But that's the response I get more than 90% of the time. And the other thing is that when people come in and audit the class, and there's a lot of middle-aged adults that come in and audit the class, and people, in their 30s and 40s and 50s, and they say, God, you ought to write a book. These ideas, ought to make it outside the walls of this classroom because this informs so much, whether you're looking to start a business, whether you're looking to change careers, do some kind of a pivot, or whether you're looking to start your own business later in life, whatever it is. And I thought, yeah, sure, I ought to write a book, but I didn't really know how to go about it in terms of getting the deal to write a book. And I did not want to self-publish. I wanted it to be done by a renowned publisher that has a great reputation so the book will get distribution and it's not a vanity project. Now, by the way, if I was a really well-known author and I knew I could sell a lot of books, I might start self-publishing because there's a much bigger profit margin to it. But earlier on, nobody knows who I am. So I want to be legitimized by the publisher. And that's what happened. Interestingly, first place that my agent went, and I won't go through the whole story, but I finally made a connection with somebody quite spontaneously, just like my friend calling up and asking about bank interest, who found my class fascinating, introduced me to her agent, and that agent ended up selling the book.
Fantastic.
So, that was just, again, it's being opportunity focused. When the antenna is up, you should write a book, you should write a book. Then you start hearing things and you can sort information and prioritize it better when that antenna is active. The first publisher they went to was one of the best business book publishers. The response was, why would business people want to know anything about creativity? So after we failed at selling this to a business book publisher, we went to a self-help book publisher, and they specialize in psychology and creativity and that sort of thing. And their response was, why would a creative person want to know anything about business? So then we went to Hachette, which is second or third largest publisher in the world. And when I walked in for the meeting, they said, we love this idea, the way that creativity and business work hand in glove. I don't think there's been a book like this before. This is terrific. And that's how the meeting started. And it went up from there with them asking me how quickly could I write this and that sort of thing. So they got it and they understood what the point was. And it's about sharing ideas and breaking down those artificial walls between disciplines. Because if you understand context, if you understand that, for me, for instance, designing a line of clothing is the same as shooting a commercial, is the same as doing a play. They're all the same thing. The protocols in most businesses are alike. You have an idea, you have to communicate that idea to others, either through pictures or words. You have to cost out the materials, the labor, how long is it going to take to do it? What's it going to cost you to do it? Then deliver it in a timely fashion, add a profit, and get paid. And that's kind of true for every business. So
Right.
I think it can open up the boundaries and embrace so much more opportunity if you look at it like that. So I really wanted to get the ideas out there and share those ideas. And my hope is it engages people in dialogue like we've been having about different things.
Well, and
And
I'm very glad you did get the ideas out there because, like I said, I fully believe that creativity is one of, if not the most misunderstood personal virtue.
I agree. I agree. And I think the world would be a better place if we were more open to that kind of expression. Well, because I think the suppression of that leads to acting out in other ways,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And I think it leads to a lot of problems that we're not solving as a society because every person goes, well, and I'm guilty of it too. You know, I'm particularly pained by environmental problems lately, especially. And I go, well, I'm not X. It's like, well, be a little bit more creative because I could contribute the skills that I do have. I may not be a biochemical engineer, but I could contribute creatively in a different way to that, whether it's raising awareness or whatever. I would love if you could give us a preview of, does the book literally walk us through how to turn our ideas into a career, or kind of walk me through some of the content of the book and what people are going to learn? Because I really want to encourage people to pick up a copy of the book.
Well, thank you. What the book does is take a lot of the best stuff from the class. And I have to say, what makes the book really good is the quality and generosity of the guests that I have in my class, because they're very candid. I don't invite people in who are evangelists for a brand. I bring people in who are willing to share their ideas and who are open about being really candid of the challenges that they face along the way. So what's interesting about the book, and this is feedback I've gotten from other people, because I can have my intent as the writer. That doesn't necessarily mean that that intent is received. It's like a comedian intends to be funny, and then they tell a joke and it falls flat and they get immediate feedback because nobody laughed. Well, when you write a book, you don't really know whether your intent has been received or not. But the thing about the book is at the end of each chapter, there's a series of questions that cause you to reflect about what you have just read. I've gotten a number of people who have said, I ended up with an entire journal filled up with notes from answering those questions. Now I'm going back through the book again, and it becomes like a workbook and an object lesson for the person. It is not a prescription for how to be creative. It is not a prescription that if you do these 10 things, you will be that successful. What I hope it does do is open the reader's mind to the dialogue, to the kind of questions that they should be asking themselves, the kind of answers they need to seek for themselves. And there's certainly no one size fits all. So there's over 52 people that I have talked to in here, but it's not a chapter after chapter of interviews. It's the story of my business and my experiences. And then there are object lessons and examples from the guests from my class throughout the book. So
Sounds
it's a whole
absolutely
narrative.
fascinating. And it sounds like, even if you hadn't said, people come away with pages of notes, what I was going to say is it really sounds like it's going to be a very big eye opener for a lot of people who are what I call the prefix life, the fixed menu life, where it's like, well, you go and you study this, and then you have to get a job in this that you studied, and then you have to work your way up the ladder in this. And it's, all the people I admire, and I'm sure you're the same way, are multidisciplinarians. One of my biggest role models growing up was a clown, an accomplished clown and mime artist, a grief counselor, a college professor, and a preschool teacher all at once, because why choose, right? and my parents were the same way. And so I think it's going to be a real game changer for a lot of people. I'm very excited to pick up my own copy. Where I assume people can buy it anywhere they can buy books, which lately is Amazon.
Yeah, it's available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Google Books, Apple Books, wherever fine books are sold.
Fantastic.
And please, if you read it and you like it, post a review on Amazon, because that helps. And if you read it and don't like it, keep it to yourself.
I love it. Jeff, is there anything that you wanted to make sure we covered that we didn't cover before I let you go?
Well, there's so much, and it's been great talking with you, because it's, we're just having a conversation about things that interest both of us, which is a lot of fun. So I think that, I guess what I would emphasize as we're drawing this to a close is have a realistic expectation about what you're doing, which means don't think that if you're not a rocket taking off immediately that you have somehow failed. Failure is when you give up. Otherwise, and this is hackneyed, but it happens to be true, is that failure is another step towards learning. And
yes.
to use, and let me put that in a real context, because it's kind of one of those awful platitudes when you hear it just like that.
Totally.
There's 140 different drugs also happening in Israel, happening in England, happening in China, where there's over 140 different kinds of treatments and vaccines that are in various stages of clinical trial for COVID-19, which has brought the world to its knees. Those scientists are incredibly creative, but they fail constantly. And those failures is what leads to the next step and the next step. And I am totally confident that there are going to be successes. But that's also a lesson for life, is that you experiment, you try things. Some things don't work. Those things that don't work can help take you to the next level. Eventually, they can help you reach your goals. So don't be discouraged when things don't work out the way you hoped. Just realize that's another part of that roller coaster ride we were talking about before. And I think that that's really important, because that also embodies perseverance. You keep going. That persistence that you have to have in order to face those odds and face those disappointments that inevitably you're going to have along the way.
I'm avoiding the temptation to bounce off of that, because I've already abused your generosity and kept you longer than I intended to. Next time I'm in New York, I'd love to give you a buzz and take you out to lunch. And I hope you do the same if you come to Israel when the skies open up again. The book is called, I'm going to triple check that I don't mistake the title. It is called Creativity, Making a Living with Your Ideas. Pick it up wherever fine books are sold. Jeff, it's been such a pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for coming on the show. And one last thing I have to ask before I let you go. I ask every guest, if there is one big takeaway that you hope people carry with them for the rest of their lives from this episode, what's that takeaway for you? It's one of those not to put you on the spot questions.
It's be open, be curious, and I'll couple that with when people talk about, so how do you foster creativity? And I think creativity is a hugely important part of life. What that means is read books, go to movies, go to plays, go to concerts, listen to music, research things online, talk to people you've never talked to before, go to meetups, go to conferences, and expose yourself constantly to ideas and challenge yourself all the time. Go out of that comfort zone that you have so that it will inspire you. And that's the way to be not only creative, I think that's the way to lead a fulfilling life, is expose yourself to the best that's out there.
That is a fantastic note to end on. I will once again thank you, Mr. Jeff Madoff. It's been such a pleasure chatting, and I hope we keep in touch.
I hope we do too. Well, we're the two people that would do it, so let's.
Absolutely.
I would love to. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. Take care.